The topic before us is family values, a Vedantic perspective. Talking about the family values of Vedic tradition, one may very well ask this question: how relevant they are to our own times? So there is a gap of perhaps 7,000 or 8,000 years between the period during which these values evolved and our own times. Well, if you look at the history of many of the ancient civilizations of the East, the Orient, you will find that many of these civilizations and nations had to go through long periods of invasions, foreign invasions, social, national cataclysms, total upheavals of the social structure, collapse of national social life. Think of the Central Asian republics, China, Korea, India, and many of these ancient Oriental civilizations. They are all very ancient. How many invasions and how many intermingling of different races. But still, these civilizations still live. And not only that, even in this 21st century, many of the values of those ancient cultures, especially family values, are still flourishing, kept intact and preserved to some extent, though there are problems. Now, historians point out one uniqueness of these civilizations, especially the family values, antiquity and continuity. These are the two unique features of the family values of ancient India. And because China got many of these values from India through Buddhism and also through so many other sources. That's why in China there used to be a statement, go to the West in search of wisdom. Now, this was a common proverb, common belief among the people in many of the Far Eastern civilizations. These civilizations are still living and being preserved because of family values. To give an example, I can give a contrast from the examples of certain ancient civilizations which perhaps did not fully preserve these family values. Think of Egypt, for example, or Greece. These are very ancient civilizations. Assyria, Babylon, or even coming to the American, of course, they are of much later origin, the Mayan, Incan, Aztec, and so on. If you want to know and study anything about the ancient Egyptian civilization, you have to go to a museum, a library, to find out how the ancient Egyptians lived during the time of Ramses II, of the early pharaohs of Egypt. If you want to know, to understand how people lived in ancient Babylon, today's Iraq, you have to go to a library or historical museums. But at the same time, if you go to India, you will still find many of those arts and sciences. For example, the Vedic mantra that I chanted at the beginning of this class, it was chanted 8,000 years back in Indian Gurukulas, Indian Vedic hermitages. the verse, the way I chanted just now. The Sahana, or you see that Sahana Bhavatu, that mantra. Om Sahana Bhavatu. This was chanted the same way 8,000 years back. Do we know how the ancient Egyptians prayed? There's no idea, everything gone, extinct. If Napoleon had not invaded the Middle East, Egypt, and later on, if the French Egyptologists had not focused their attention on Egyptology, perhaps we'd have lost many things. We would not be able to uncover the secrets of the pharaohs or the mummies or the pyramids. There is a statement in Vivekananda's complete works. You know, after preaching in this country for 4 years, from 1893 to 1896 end, Swamiji went back to India. And in 1897 January, perhaps on 15th or so, he landed in Colombo, Sri Lanka. It's a part of Indian subcontinent. It's the same cultural entity. Swamiji gave a lecture on the following day in Floral Hall in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. There, Swamiji makes a statement. If Manu returned today, he won't be bewildered. He won't find himself in a strange land. This statement. Manu was the ancient lawgiver who lived perhaps 3rd century BC. In fact, this Manu Smriti, the code of Manu, something like a constitution in metrical form, dates back to more than 3000 BC. This is Manu Smriti, which I'm going to quote from right now. And Swamiji says, if this ancient lawgiver sage ever returned to India in 1897 January, he won't find that he's coming to a new country, a new land, or he is interacting with a new culture. He won't find himself in a strange land. He won't be bewildered. He won't be surprised. The same ancient Vedic traditions continue to exist in India. All these art forms, see Bharatanatyam, it is based on Bharata Muni's Natya Shastram, which is commented upon by a Sanskrit scholar whom I knew very well. The book was published around 35 years back. The commentary on Natya Shastram, which is a fundamental textbook of the art of dancing, not just spirituality or philosophy. That also is continuing today for the last several thousands of years. So the point is, all these things have been possible because of certain special characteristics of the family life. In Vedic times, the sanctity of human relationship, the sanctity of the institution of marriage, even the idea of the inseparable relationship, which is part of the Catholic tradition, is a legacy that comes from Vedic culture. There is a mantra in Rigveda Samhita, the 10th mandala, which says the husband and wife are embarking on a pilgrimage, sharing the same dharma. Grihnamite saubhagatvaya hastam. This is a mantra, which is called Vivaha Sukta. Vivaha is the 15th sacrament of the षोडश Samskaras. Of the 16 sacraments which were preserved in Vedic heritage, Vivaha means marriage, is the 15th one. The 16th, the last one is Antyeshti, means death, where the pilgrimage comes to an end. Your body is put on fire after death. Now, this idea that idam, see, Grihnamite saubhagatvaya hastam is how it begins. The husband and wife joining together, embarking on a pilgrimage. based on the concept of sanctity and inseparability of the bond, sacred bond, which is now preserved, maybe unfortunately, maybe not as much as it used to be, even in the Catholic tradition, and many of the non-Protestant denominations of Christian religion, or in ancient religions like Judaism, for example. Many of these values are being preserved, which is what really enabled them to survive persecution, including the Holocaust, for the last 2 millennia. So family values are very, very sacred, very important. When family values are neglected, society collapses, because family is the fundamental, the crucial, the foundational institution of human life, social life, and national life. In one of the convocation addresses that you find in Vedic literature, Yajurveda Samhita, a student is sent to a hermitage to study under a teacher. After undergoing education for 12 years, the student returns home. So this is the conclusion of the first stage of human life. It means Brahmacharyasama, the period of studentship, then the period of householdership, then the period of retirement and contemplation, and for the fourth stage, the period of what we call sannyasa, in a way we can say, one sets his or her eyes on God, the transcendental reality, in search of the highest spiritual illumination. After finishing all the roles of studentship, after playing the role of an householder, husband or wife, after looking after them, and then after spending some years in a place of contemplation, reading scriptures, praying to God, finally setting your eyes and heart completely on God. Sannyasa is called. So 4 stages, which we are going to deal with elaborately in the coming few minutes. Now the point is, this convocation address, that was what I was referring to. It begins like the Vedam, Anuchya, Acharya, Andevasanam, Anushasti, Satyam Bada, Dharmam Chara, Satyana Pramadidavyam, Dharmana Pramadidavyam, Madrudevo Bhava, Pitrudevo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Aditi Devo Bhava, Yani Anavadyani Karmani, Tani Sevidavyani, No Idarani. I am turning, poetry into prose. So, Shankaracharya says in one of his stotras, hymns, the genius of a great linguist is the ability to turn prose into poetry. But I am turning poetry into prose because I am putting in the form of prose order. So the meaning is this. After teaching the Vedas, the teacher addresses the group of students as they are preparing to go home after the completion of 12 years of education. First, the teacher deals with some fundamental values, satyam vada, dharmam chara, etc. You should speak the truth, you should follow the path of dharma, virtuousness, righteousness. And then the teacher comes to the context of family life. How you should interact with your mother, your father, your guest, and also your teacher. Matrudevo Bhava, this is the first instruction dealing with the subject of the institution of family life. Your mother should be God, like God or goddess to you. This is a literal meaning. Let your mother be God, the God to you. Literal meaning. What is the implied meaning? The idea is you must respect your mother as much as you respect, you honor God Himself. Doesn't mean that you should worship mother or anything. The meaning is the sanctity of relationship between the child and mother is the first and most important, crucial foundation of cultured, civilized human life. Otherwise, if we don't follow that principle, we are joining the kingdom of the birds and animals. Birds will drive away their little ones when they are grown up, when they can manage to get their own food. Mother feeds the little ones only so long as the little ones are incapable of looking after themselves. But here, even after the son or daughter has grown up and have themselves becomes parents, father or mother, they should continue respecting their parents. So this sacredness of relationship. And then comes Pitrudevo Bhava. Now this Manu has an interesting statement. Manu says the relationship of a son or a daughter to his or her mother is the most sacred. And to drive home this idea, Manu has an important statement here. Upadhyayan Deshacharya Acharya tu Shatam Pida Sahasram tu Pitrun Mata Gauravena Atirichade. Sahasram, that means Upadhyaya Deshacharya Acharya tu Shatam Pida. You should respect your professor more than a part-time teacher. You know, sometimes in a university, if you're studying, once in a while a guest lecturer will come. And he may take some few lectures and go away. You should pay more attention, more respect to the professor under whom you are getting academic training. This is in modern context. In ancient context, it means the one who enables you, the one who performs one of the sacraments called Upanayana, means going through the sacred thread ceremony which enables you to begin the study of the Vedas, the first stage of teachership. And then he says, Acharya tu Shadampida. You should respect your father more than you respect even the most learned of your professors. And then, Sahasram tu Pitrun Mata. You should respect your mother 1,000 times as much as you honor your father. Gauravena Tirichide means more and more respect and honor you give. The reason is, it is the mother who teaches you the first lessons of life. The teachers in the university may teach you things that may enable you to get a job, to lead a prosperous, comfortable life. But the first instruction comes from the mother. And of course, the next is Pitrudevo Bhava. Now, one may ask this question, especially in modern times, there is such a thing as the tyranny of conventions. This subject often arises. When I had to discuss this subject to groups of European administrators, because the members of the embassies, foreign attaches used to come and we had to give them orientation of Indian family culture. I have done it many times back in India. So they used to ask this question. How can we continue living under the care of parents all our life? So is it possible? So my reply, of course, before I came to this country, my reply was, well, there is such a thing as the tyranny of conventions and tyranny of seniority. Sometimes in joint stock families in India, the grandfather decides which academic course the grandson or granddaughter should join. Every activity, every important decision in the life of new generations used to be taken arbitrarily in a very tyrannical way by the parents or grandparents, and in some cases great-grandparents. 4 generations, 3 generations living under the same roof. It has a serious problem. First of all, it kills your ability to become self-reliant. It also kills your confidence, self-confidence. And also, in modern industrial age, it destroys the power of innovation. I can give one clear illustration from the context of Silicon Valley. During the early years, there was a competition between Japan and the United States, because Japan was leading the world in electronics. But when IT was invented, there used to be some competition between Japan and Silicon Valley in information technology. But Japan lost it in spite of their high work ethic, perfectionism, professional efficiency, discipline, all these wonderful qualities which are characteristic of Japanese race. They lost the competition to Silicon Valley. They say the reason why the Japanese lost the competition is because of the conservatism. So Americans can toy with the experiment with a new idea anytime, any day. And that is because maybe unfortunately, the flexibility in family traditions. An American youngster won't worry much about what his father or grandfather is going to think when he takes a decision to join a company or start some experiment. But in Japan, they had to consider all these faculties. So Japanese companies were very, very conservative, very tradition-bound. So they lost the competition. So Silicon Valley became the cradle of world information technology. This is being illustrated by many industrial experts. So conservatism and rigidity of family values can become a liability if you apply the same ancient values to our times. That should be kept in mind. If you build a society based on the ancient concept of family values, this problem is always there. What is called the tyranny of conventions, the tyranny of hierarchy, the tyranny of seniority. You won't feel like breaking out of the established conventions and traditions. And that can become a serious problem, a liability. So that should be kept in mind. But at the same time, the collapse of family values, the flexibility in family values, neglect of the sacredness and sanctity of family values, and relationship between different members of the family can actually ruin the social fabric in the long run. All the great gifts of modern science and technology may collapse, may disappear if the family values are totally neglected. Though flexibility and loose family values indirectly, not directly, indirectly can encourage innovation, self-reliance, and also the willingness to take risk. See, in conservative societies, youngsters don't show the same willingness to take risk. In America, a CEO, a big international company, billionaire CEO, if he loses his job, he has the confidence. In some cases, he may do that. The next day, he can go to Trader Joe's and start packing things, selling things, getting $30 per hour or $10 per hour. He can do that. He's not ashamed of that. The dignity of labor, which is the uniqueness of American social structure, which Vivekananda admired so much. So many of these great qualities can be the indirect benefits of flexibility of family values. That's true. In India, if you find a CEO, he will never, if he loses his job, he will go in retirement. He will not go to Trader Joe's and start working for $10 per day, per hour. He won't do that. He will be excommunicated from his family and also from society. His friends will no more accept him. In America, an American will be proudly like, I'm a barber. And so much of pride, so much of positive self-respect. An American will say, I'm a barber, I'm a gardener. If you go to India or China, I'm a gardener, they'll be very apologetic. I'm such a pitiable, unfortunately, I'm a barber, I'm a gardener. But in America, on the other hand, every American, even if he's a well-educated, a CEO American will say, I'm a gardener. So that is the greatness, the unique gifts of, I would say, self-reliance and freedom that comes through indirectly loosening of family values. But the price we have to pay is a total collapse of social structure. Which is better? So Vivekananda in modern times said, what we need is a blending of the positive virtues of modern Western culture, the freedom, the innovation, the scientific temperament, the self-reliance, the dignity of labor, which Swami Vivekananda admired so much. All these great qualities, leadership skills. Again, the willingness to take risk, the readiness to do any work and be proud of it. All these great qualities of modern Western culture and social structure, which Swamiji found mostly in this country, to a lesser extent in more conservative European societies like England, maybe, but to a much lesser extent compared to America. So these values, the positive Western values, should be blended together, harmonized together with some of the positive values of Oriental traditions, like a sense of sanctity of the institution of marriage. The parents looking after the children, including financing their education. That's very important. And the children looking after the parents or grandparents, even after they have grown up, they have themselves become parents. It's not that they should live under one roof, but the point is a harmonious blending of the best of the Occidental and the best of the Oriental, the best of the Western modern and the best of the Eastern traditional values. This was what Vivekananda always suggested. So let us say the conservatism of the Eastern traditions to the extent of preserving the sanctity of family life, and the liberalism of modern Western societies to the extent of encouraging dignity of labor, self-reliance, freedom to take decisions, willingness to take risk, and so on. Now, this much about some of the practical aspects of the family values of Western and Eastern. Now, I shall deal with some of the sacraments of ancient Vedic family life, because that's the most important topic right now in front of us. So, to begin with, we must say that in ancient Indian Vedantic family structure, there were 4 fundamental values, which are technically called Purusharthas. Purushena arthadedi Purushartha means values, ideals to be sought after, to be realized by every member of the family. It's called Purushartha, fundamental values. Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. These are the 4 Purusharthas. Among these 4 Purusharthas, 2 values are means and 2 values are ends or goals. Moksha is the supreme spiritual liberation. And Kama is the fulfillment of material desires. Desires, worldly desires. These are two goals. One, on the one hand, the higher transcendental goal of human life, moksha, liberation. What's the meaning of this life? If you have got money, prospect, status, plenty of bank balance, everything going on fine, it is the nature of every refined, cultured man to ask the question, where do all these end? What's the meaning of human existence? Is there something beyond enjoying the physical comforts that you can achieve with money, with social status and so on? Or is there something higher in human life to be sought after? At that time, you think of the transcendental value, which is technically called liberation or moksha. So in Buddhist tradition, you call nirvana. In Christian tradition, you may call Christian experience or entering the heaven, kingdom of heaven. In Vedantic tradition, liberation, moksha, from this cycle of cosmic rotation, birth, life, death and rebirth, it goes on rotating, going beyond the psychophysical mechanism and is coming and going, reaching the highest transcendental spiritual goal. It is called moksha or liberation. Let us say in modern times, the highest spiritual illumination. Those who do not go for this, they have got another goal. Kama means fulfillment of desires. These are two goals at two different levels, depending upon our evolution, intellectual, spiritual, cultural evolution. Those who are highly evolved, think of moksha, liberation, spiritual illumination, spiritual enlightenment. And those who are still at a purely physical level, think of the highest goal in terms of fulfilling their sensual pleasures. What are the means? Dharma and artha are mean. Dharma means certain fundamental moral, ethical values of righteousness. Artha means, the instruments for fulfilling the desires. So a grihastha or an householder who is leading family life is allowed to acquire wealth, status, all these through the path of dharma with the purpose of enjoying physical comforts. So enjoyment of pleasures or enjoyments in general are allowed in Vedic tradition, but one condition, it should not be in conflict with the principles of dharma. One should not deviate from the path of dharma while pursuing the path of artha and kama, means material pleasures and enjoyments. So if a family person, whether men or women, after acquiring wealth, all the material things necessary for enjoying worldly comforts, but without deviating from the path of dharma, completely upholding the path of dharma, if that person leads a very ethical moral life, he or she will come to a stage of evolution when she or he may feel, well, I have got plenty of money, I have enjoyed everything. Is there something beyond all this? Then you start thinking of moksha, liberation. So all these four values are in a way interconnected. But those who have a strong sense of spiritual discerning mind, power to discern what is right and what is wrong, can straight away go to the highest goal, liberation or moksha, even by passing the intermediary stages of artha and kama. Now, in the practice of these four fundamental values, the Vedic sages evolved a system of sacraments. So, these sacraments are crucial in Vedic scheme of life. Altogether, if you stretch and if you give an elaborate description, you can have a list of 40 sacraments, which is called samskaras. But in a general way, from the perspective of ordinary householders, we can say there are 16 fundamental sacraments, beginning with birth and ending with death. So that's what we are going to discuss now to take up this subject. These 16 samskaras. Well, the first of the sacrament is related to life, birth itself. It is technically called garbhadanam, which means it is a samskara or a sacrament that sanctifies conception. So parents expecting a new child to be born should follow should do certain spiritual practices, because that will influence the culture, the mindset, and eventually the destiny of the newly born child. So that's called garbhadanam. Literally means garbha santharide yena samskara karmana tat. Means the idea is this: the child to be born acquires certain samskaras, certain impressions, certain characteristics and attitudes. If the parents themselves practice meditation, reading of holy scriptures, thinking of holy sacred ideas, taking vows and so on. Because the attitudes of parents will directly not only reflect on but influence, even mold the attitudes and character of the newly born children. Anger, hatred, jealousy, or piety, prayerful attitude, following certain vows and disciplines, depending upon what the parents observe, even while expecting a child, will directly influence the character of the child. So the first sacrament begins before you are born. The second sacrament is of course, it is called the Pumsavanam. It is something performed in the 3rd month of pregnancy for the birth of a male child. Certain vows, Vedic karmas, prayers, offerings to ancestors for their blessings, all this. Well, again, I must somehow link these samskaras to our times. Maybe you have to remember, when I gave this subject for Sunday lecture, I was thinking, in what way is it going to be relevant to the 21st century modern world? One cannot expect to follow all those ancient Vedantic Vedic rituals in our times. Impossible. But understanding of some of these sacraments and their underlying principles will help us to some extent to follow certain disciplines and practices which will certainly have a beneficial effect in society and family life, even in this 21st century. These are universal values. These values should not be construed or looked upon as basically values of a particular race or religion or anything. All these have universal applications. You can ask any doctor. Parents following certain spiritual practices while expecting a child, will be behaving with the newborn child, will be displaying before the child a corresponding behavior pattern. And that will be the first experience, that will be the first education for the child. So in a way that can be done, but in any tradition, whatever religious tradition we belong to, or even if you do not belong to any religious tradition, some of these fundamental values, if we keep in mind, can help us even in these times. So one should not interpret that should not think that these practices should be performed exactly in a very literary way in this modern age. It may not be possible, but the performance of Vedic karmas and offerings to ancestors and prayers to some transcendental reality, if we believe in God, it is very good, will certainly create an appropriate family atmosphere and will be giving a good welcome to the newborn children. That's the idea. The third samskara is called Simandonayanam, it is called. It is a ceremony, a samskara, sacrament performed for the health and longevity of the mother and child, even before birth. So it involves prayers to the goddess of wealth, goddess of wisdom, prayers to different deities, and meditative practices for the welfare and prosperity of the child going to be born. The fourth one is Jata Karma. It is nothing but it's also a set of prayers offered to gods and goddesses for the strength, long life, and intelligence, and proper character and attitudes for the newborn child. After the child is born, parents together with some members of the elders of the family will offer prayers to different deities, praying for long life and good intelligence. That's called buddhi. Metha, purified intelligence. Purified intelligence means intelligence with proper attitude, based on dharma. That is called metta in a way. So what happens, in families, the father will utter a sacred mantra called Gayatri mantra on the ears of the child, whispers the Gayatri mantra on the ears of the child. The fifth sacrament is giving a name, which is done on the 11th day after the birth of the child. Namakarana means Nama Kriyade Yasmin Karmani. That means by a ceremonial act with prayers, the father gives an appropriate name to the child. Because the name should remind us or something auspicious. So some of the scriptures dealing with this subject give instructions. The name should be according to the day on which the child is born, what is called the astrological calculations, nakshatra, stars, etc. But more important that the name should be such a name that reminds us of something auspicious. So when a father or mother calls a child by the name, that name should be auspicious, in the sense it should remind us and remind the child of something positive, auspicious, and in a way that's something that means good for the welfare of the family. That is the fifth sacrament. The sixth one is Annaprasanam. Annam prashide yena karmana. That means this is a derivation Sanskrit, means in a ceremonial way, the parents should give cooked food in a ceremonial way to the child. That food should be offered to God. So with an attitude of prayerfulness, the parent should give food, cooked food to the child. That is called Annaprasana, the seventh sacrament. There may be an inherent spiritual significance behind this, how this becomes a ceremony. You can bring some bread from Trader Joe's and give, what's the matter? The point is, whatever we eat, the eaten food has got two aspects. One, the gross external aspect, the subtle aspect. Even if we eat organic food, which is pure, if we eat it with violent emotions or temperaments, that food may not give you physical sickness, but may give you mental sickness. So the attitude with which we eat food also decides its eventual effect on the mind of the one who eats, not the body. The gross aspect of the food is the hygiene, whether it be organic or non-organic, these are all grosser aspects. The subtle aspect has something to do with the attitude with which the child or anyone who eats the food, or the attitude with which the food is offered to child. So it is done in a very ceremonial way, attaching a sense of sanctity to the whole process. You offer the food to God, so it becomes offered food, and then you give it to the child. So they believe, or maybe they used to believe in ancient times, that this will have a positive effect on the character or the intelligence of the child. But one thing is very clear, you can verify in modern times. If anybody eats wonderful organic food with violent emotions, it may not be very good even for physical health, leave alone mental health. On the other hand, if you eat the food, thinking that food is something sacred, offered to God, and you eat it as a sense of sanctity, it will have a positive effect. Not on the body, but on the attitude. Just a meaning here. The eighth sacrament is Chudakaranam, which is nothing but, the act which the tuft is created. That's in Vedic tradition, when a male child is given the first hair cutting, a piece of the tuft is left out, which indicates his evolution through the process of education, Upanayana, Vedic education, and so on, which finally culminates when you take sannyasa, the life of mendicancy. The tuft that is created at the time of this Chudakaranam ceremony is removed when you go beyond all family obligations and the realm of family values, when you become a mendicant. So at that time it is removed and the hair is shaved. That time of taking life of renunciation or mendicancy. The ninth one is Karna Veda, where the ear is pierced. It's an ancient tradition. Maybe in those days they used to wear rings in the ears. It may be local customs. Some of these rituals had only socio-anthropological significance. But some of these rituals have got universal significance. For example, the sense of sanctity attached to the whole process of the child being born in this world, and the sense of sanctity attached to the ceremony of giving an auspicious name and feeding the child with food in an auspicious way, some of these have got universal symbolism and significance. And some of the sacraments have got only cultural, socio-anthropological implication, which must have evolved in the Indian subcontinent at a time which may not have much universal significance to our times. Some of these sacraments. The 10th one is very important. It's called Vidyarambha, the beginning of education, means the child learns the alphabet, which is this ceremony through which the child is initiated into the world of education, learning the alphabet, which is done in a very ceremonial way with a lot of prayers, worships, meditations, and along with that, the child is initiated to the world of alphabet. Maybe the teacher may write an auspicious symbol, sound symbol on the tongue of the child and may make him write it. That's the ceremony. This has got a significance. The 11th one is Upanayanam, which is, the child is initiated into the first stage in Vedic learning. It is Gayatri. Gayatri is one of the meters found in Vedic literature. It is also one of the most auspicious prayers found in Vedic literature. So, initiating the child into this mystery of Gayatri mantra is called Upanayanam, it is called. So, through this process, the young boy becomes eligible to begin a life of studentship, brahmacharya ashrama, and he is fit to start the formal study of the Vedas. Then the 12th one is Vedarambha. It is one of the Veda Vratas. It means a child is sent to a Vedic hermitage for formal study of the Vedas. For 12 years, he is supposed to study the Vedas, serving the teacher, helping the teacher, and praying to the teacher. Then there is one Godanam. It is also, it consecrates the first shaving of the student's beard. It is also may have some social anthropological significance. But there is a 14th sacrament is very important, Samavartanam. And this is very important, which we are discussing just now at the beginning of this class. Samavartanam means the child, after completing 12 years of Vedic education, is returning home to become an householder, to marry, and to live the full life of an householder, either husband and wife in the family. So he is instructed how he should behave with neighbors, with his children, with his guests, with his teachers, and also, most important, with his parents. It is called Samavartanam, which is very crucial and very important. It's the 14th sacrament. The Samyak Avartade Yena Karmanatad. It is a kind of very, very important sacrament, which I quoted earlier. I quoted from a convocation address in the Yajurveda. That means Veda Manucha Acharya Andevasina Manishaste. I quoted this. Means after teaching the Vedas for 12 years, the professor is calling the students in front of him and gives a set of instructions that will help them to lead the life of an ideal householder with a sense of harmony and peace, without friction. He should be able to look upon his parents and honor them as much as he honors God himself. Means he should not neglect them. Because in ancient family tradition, there used to be a belief, if you neglect your parents, then your children will give back the same thing to you when you get old. I give the story. The story tells the message much more eloquently than any amount of recitation from the Vedas. So you can listen to the story. So there was a family, and the parents did not ill-treat their parents, means very well. The grandparents were not treated very well. The little child used to watch how his own father was treating his grandfather. The child's grandfather means his father's father. So he used to be treated very, very tragic way. And he should open our heart. He had a mud pot, a dirty, broken mud pot. That was the pot on which the father used to feed, used to give food to his father. The child used to watch, the innocent child. He did not understand. So one day, he was going in search of something. And he found another broken pot. The father asked him, "What's the matter? Why are you going in search of the dirty mud pot?" "No, I am preparing an appropriate vessel for you. When you get old, I want to feed you in this." The child was following the footsteps of the father. So the child used to watch how his father used to ill-treat his grandfather. He did not know. So he collected a sufficiently nasty-looking, dirty, filthy pot and kept it there. And the father asked him, "What's the matter?" "I am also preparing a proper, appropriate plate for you. So when you get old, I can give you food in this." It was shocking. It was a great shock to the father. And it had the effect of changing his whole life and attitude towards his own father. So that tells enough of the importance of sanctity of family relationship. So that's why the instructor began his convocation address, Matrudevo Bhava, Pitudevo Bhava. The 15th sacrament is Vivaha, means it's an important samskara by which a man endures the second stage of life, means Grahasthasrama, he becomes an householder, marriage. Which is supposed to, as I mentioned in the beginning, it is looked upon as a pilgrimage that husband and wife undertake together. And 16th, last one is Antyeshti. That is, when the person dies, his body is the final samskara in the life cycle of a human being. His body is burned. It's a yajna in which the body is offered as an oblation to the sacred fire. Now, the sacred fire used to be an important symbol in Vedic tradition, Vedic religion. The sacred fire is the fire that you light when you perform the rituals associated with marriage ceremony. The same sacred fire is associated with the rituals associated with initiation into Gayatri Mantra, Vedic education. The same sacred fire is used to lit the funeral fire when after death the body is consumed, is offered as an oblation to the sacred fire. It is performed by the son of the deceased person and is a consecration of the person's death. So the technical name by which it is known as Antyeshti, means Antya Ishti, means the last religious act, which is done as an act of oblation, as an act of sacrifice, as an act of offering to Christ. It means whole life is an offering. Again, this is not the end of the journey. Life doesn't begin with birth and ends with death. Even after the last ritual, a dutiful son or daughter will have to perform certain ceremonies to ensure that the deceased father and mother will have a smooth journey in the higher worlds till that person is reborn again in another family. So practically the whole life is looked upon as an oblation, as a spiritual pilgrimage. That's an important thing. And one of the most unique and significant institutions of ancient Vedic culture was the relationship between the student and teacher. And that is something very important. Teacher is not one who is paid by the university. And you are not one who pays the teacher's wages indirectly through the university, through your tuition fees. If that were the system, there will be no connection. So there is a spiritual bond, spiritual relationship between the student and teacher. One may learn from a teacher, but the total effect of that learning depends not only on the intensity of effort or the grade with which you pass the university, but also the attitude and respect that you have in your mind towards the teacher who teaches you. And if you want to know any proof, if you read the history of ancient traditions like the Jewish, for example, or ancient Vedic traditions, or ancient Chinese culture, they could survive because of many of the great arts and sciences and skills survived in these societies because of the sense of sanctity attached to the relationship between the student and the teacher. Here I'm talking about teacher-student relationship in the context of secular studies, not spiritual studies. That's entirely different. Here we are talking about the sanctity of relationship between a teacher in a school or a college or a university and a student who studies there. If the student has no respect for the teacher, first of all, he may not be able to study properly. Even if he is able to study properly, he will not be able to remember or make use of whatever studies he has achieved. This is an important principle in the teacher-student relationship concept of Vedic culture. Because even after leaving the university, the effect of your learning continues. And that part of education is as important as the learning that you get when you are within the university, when you are in the classroom. Because if you have a good teacher whom you have respected, then his teachings will inspire you to continue your learning. If you have a good professor, that's a sign of a good professor. If you have a good professor, then you learn, you will attend his classes. And after leaving the university, the class, you will go to the library to study more of what the professor has taught, because he has instilled an inherent interest. He has lighted the candle of the light of knowledge within you, the light of inquiry, the light of inquisitiveness, the light of thirst and hunger for more knowledge. So if you have a good professor, then after leaving the university, you will continue your education. So that's why it is stated here in this tradition, Upaniya Guru Sishyam Sikshayi Saujamatidaha Acharam Aknikaryam Cha Sandhyopasanam. Just some of the verses in the then Brahmarambe Avasani Cha Padu Grahyo Guru Sada Samkhatya Hastavadheyam Sahi Brahmanjali Smrita. So there are many verses which explain how a student should approach a teacher and how a teacher, an ideal teacher, should deal with the student and also with the subject that he is teaching. So the attitude, the respect, the sense of reverence with which a student approaches a teacher decides the effect of his education. So anyway, I'm not going to those details for want of time. The point is, you find a very wonderful concept of family life, where the institution of family is considered to be something sacred, something to be treated as with a sense of sanctity. And equally important is the relationship between the student and teacher, because that's very crucial in forming our attitudes. What we learn from the schools and teacher will evolve into our character and attitudes with which we perform our duties and responsibilities within the family structure. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishnarpanamastu.